Use some more questions. Got to be a short show otherwise.
We'll just talk slow.
Yes.
I think this is a topic that can be discussed whether there's questions or not.
You're talking about the second hour.
Which can always start early.
If you have $10,000, that's the ante required to get into the room.
All you need is a knife.
Has anybody ever been to Hassa in Saudi Arabia? Am I pronouncing that correctly, or is it? No. I see Al Hassa, but I don't see that.
Hassa?
Is it Hassa? That's right. That would have been my first guess.
Or Huzzah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. So any questions that you may have, first hour every day, 7 days a week. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about the $10,000 studio. So if we had a little more than 1,000, but a little less than 100,000, what would we spend? So anyway, or a little less than 10,000. So anyway, what would we spend here? And so we'll talk about cameras and mics and lights and all the things that are connected to that. So stay tuned for that in the second hour. And if you've got questions about that or comments, go ahead and throw those in right now, along with the first hour questions. Of course, this show doesn't happen without the producers. That's you, actually asking questions and driving this conversation. So make sure to ask those questions and to vote on the questions so that we would know what order you'd like us to talk about them. All right, go ahead, Bill. What do we got?
Our first question this morning comes from Andre Dahle in Berlin, and he says, chances are high that we'll get a customer who's using Teams for their hybrid events. Which resources should I look for to get a Teams master? Are there any possibilities to control Teams via a Stream Deck, a bit similar to how Zoom OSC companion workflows work?
I go, Jonas.
First of all, I have to say I'm sorry for you. There is a Microsoft Teams Stream Deck plugin that I've heard good experiences and I've heard bad experiences with it. What's really important with Teams is you're playing on a wholly different security level, because Teams gives the orgs way more access to what you can lock down on a per meeting basis and on a whole organization unit. So make sure that if you have speakers from that organization, you are able to do a speaker prep with them. With Teams, it's really important that their account logs into the production meeting before. We have had issues where the CEO isn't allowed to join external companies' meetings. If you can, get in contact with the tenant administrator for that company to make sure that you have someone on the short dial. If you decide you want to use the NDI output out of Teams, that you can call them and say, hey, help, we need this enabled. there is still a web client for Microsoft Teams. And funnily enough, that has less features, but for production, sometimes it's awesome because it has less overlays, it has less processing on the audio input, and you can join it without poisoning your whole system with that specific org's Teams account, which is also really important. And then there isn't really an app like Zoom ISO, Zoom OSC for it. A lot of stuff is built into the app, but it really depends on the organization. So please keep in mind what organization you're using. And then, don't think you will ever achieve anything above 1080p. Haven't seen a 1080p coming out of Teams that looks good. I would much rather settle for a good 720p. Some things to keep in mind is they still have an automatic switch for music mode. So play some music at the start and it might show up with, hey, here is an additional music mode that we don't highlight to you till we think you're playing music. Test it with voices during your tests as well. And then just keep in mind it's Microsoft Teams and there might be issues. One of the issues is the person scheduling the meeting. So if your client schedules the meeting, they have more rights than you. And sometimes they misclick and click mute everyone. With a couple playouts into Teams where the client joins a call and thinks someone is unmuted, mutes everyone, including our feed, which then requires you to request permission to unmute again. So things like that, keep that in mind. And then one issue we found with Teams is your local preview is not what you're sending. So make sure that you have a separate device with Teams that you can monitor what the Teams is getting. Because we had an issue where we saw that we're sending the video. I saw that the microphone is being inputted in the little audio meter, but nothing came out on the other end till we stopped out our video and audio feeds. So that's just a couple things to keep in mind when you need to work in that environment.
One question that we also ask oftentimes is, now, if you're dealing with Microsoft directly, this won't go very far. And some companies are very dogmatic about Teams, but some of them, it's just the delivery method that they want. And that might be Teams, it might be WebEx, it might be a couple of other things. We ask them, do you need to have all the speakers in that platform, or do you just need the event to occur in that platform? And that's an important question, because what we've done in some cases is that we produce the whole event in Zoom and just join Teams or WebEx as just one participant, and that participant is the show. And what's funny is that we started doing that in Zoom. So we would enter a webinar, but we would have the meeting be, well, that's what we're doing here, right? So we have all of us are in a meeting, and the program of this meeting is going to another meeting. And so in the same way, we would do this whole show the way we do it in Zoom with all the tools that Zoom has, and then simply publish that to Teams or to WebEx or to whatever, because sometimes they want that security because all their employees are using Teams, but what the speakers are in isn't as important. So those are things to kind of think about too, because the tools, because of Liminal, the tools that are within Zoom are dramatically better than everybody else's. It's not close. It's like you see them and then you can't see the next number two anywhere in the distance. So you just have to know that if you can get them to just let you publish to it, you're in a better place. Next question.
Mark Giuliani comes up next from Washington, D.C., and Mark says, we're working with a nonprofit that wants us to restream an event to our platform tonight. Our contacts don't know the details about the stream. How do we screen scrape using a Mac Mini with Decklink card and an ATEM with a web presenter?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So if you want to use the Decklink card to output, I would use something like OBS that allows you to take a Chromium source and interact with it. In OBS, you can right-click on the browser source and click Interact. That way you can click play, unmute, whatever the platform that you might need to screen scrape needs, and then you can output it over SDI that way. It might be better for you to try to convert the HDMI out of your Mac into an SDI feed and do it that way. So you skip over the whole OBS feed. And if you have no information, I would just try to keep it simple, make it look like you are just watching the feed and then screen capture it. Most of the feeds do have like a full screen feature, use that. But don't try to do anything fancy. That probably yeah, I wouldn't try to like get the HLS URL and put that into a player or something like that. I would just screen capture it.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused by the. I guess so they want to. So they just have to go to this. I guess this is the issue. They have to go to a stream, get the stream, and just publish it.
It sounds like the company is already doing a stream to, I don't know, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever, and that he got the call, hey, can you also stream that to your platform? And he needs to restream it.
Yeah, OBS would work well. Also, this is a place that I don't know why.
Vmix?
No, not Vmix.
VLC.
VLC. Ah, there.
I don't know why that just jumped out of my head. But VLC will also, you can attach it to an object. It'll go full screen and you can push it out. We've seen people use VLC for that kind of thing as well. If you can get a hold of the, sometimes you can get a hold, if they're streaming, there may be a manifest floating around in the page. So one of the things that's interesting is that your Chrome will not be able to see, can't see an HLS. So if you find the HLS, so what sometimes we do is we can go into Chrome and go into developer tools and see the source code of the page. And then we find the manifest inside of that. It'll be M3U8 is hidden somewhere in the page. We grab that and we put it back into, and then we can use that as a link to grab onto the HLS stream directly. So that might be another way you can handle it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Khaled Al-Jamaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Hey, Alex, when will the famous Alex screen annotation app be available? Your daily stream of knowledge, by the way, is awesome. Thanks to the Office Hours community, he notes.
Thanks, Khalid. It's so close. So there's a couple little gestures that I'm working on, and I'll be testing it over the weekend. We're so close to being there. so anyway, Juan Carlos has done some amazing work on it. I think that it could. There's some business stuff that I got to sort out as far as like getting all the stuff linkages with the App Store, but we should have that sorted out in the next week or two. And so we're probably a week or two out now. I know Juan is probably going, what is he talking about? We're still a month away. So anyway, but we're very, very close. Everything works really well. One of the big things that we've been really working on is making sure that when we do this, that this is very smooth and consistent. And it's been a little bit of work to get that working. And then the other thing is that we decided that we wanted it to be iPad and M1 compatible so that you could just install it on both of them as a single install. And that took a little bit more work because I'm obsessed with not having any interface. so there's a lot of gestures that are hidden into it and keystrokes and so on and so forth because I want to be able to drive if you're using it on the Mac, I want to drive it all to your Stream Deck or to anything else. So it's all keystroke. And on the iPad, I want it to be all gestures so that you just get used to how you interact with it. But figuring out what we do with 2 fingers and 4 fingers and 3 fingers and doing all those things takes a little bit of. It's taken a little bit of work to figure that out. So, and Juan has done an amazing job. And so we're very, very, very close now. So probably a couple weeks. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego says, hi, Alex. What mic, camera, and lights do you use for your current mobile setup?
For my mobile setup, I have moved to just going ahead and taking this camera down. So the camera that we have here, that's my Sony FX30. It just turns out to be a really great camera to just take on the road and take pictures with. And but I've been taking it now with me because I think I got so used to how it looked. I decided I didn't really want a web camera when I was traveling. Then I take a Mix Pre 3 with noise assist and usually I have both a DPA 4066 and a Countryman H6, and I find in different environments they work differently. And then I have a couple. I take typically 4 Nanlite 6C Pavo tubes, 2 to color the background oftentimes, and then 2 to as key lights, and then a bundle of wires and a laptop. Oh, and one other thing that I have, I can't grab it. One key piece is I have this little riser for my laptop that kind of goes down to nothing. It goes flat. And you can pull it up and it forms kind of a leg that you can set the laptop on so that I can move that laptop up a little bit to get my eye line. I'm not looking down at it. That turned out to be a key purchase for that. But all of it fits relatively easily into my backpack. So it's all a pretty small containment. I just got some of the DOM key wraps. I had a lot of them, and they're being used for other things, so I can wrap up my lens and my camera. So that's the only last little bit. And I found a great little. I was using an old Lectrosonic case to try to stuff everything into it, and it wasn't enough room. And I found that if I just went a little bit bigger to a case I found on YouTube that has a couple sections, I'm able to get everything in there, and it's really nice and compact. It takes about 15 minutes to set up, and the first one that I did took about 45. So I feel like I'm getting better. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida comes up next. Has anyone had recent problems pointing Zoom custom live streaming to Restream.io? Restream was blocked by Zoom for us yesterday, but worked directly to YouTube. The creds are checked and the Restream tested okay. And then he's got a frowny emoji, so I guess he's still having trouble.
Yeah, I've had a lot of trouble with the Zoom custom live streaming when I didn't have, or the YouTube streaming, when I didn't have if I didn't put the return feedback in. It wants to know where it's going, so that it can have a feedback there. And I've had trouble with that in the past. I don't know why you would have trouble with the custom live streaming. You shouldn't have that problem because it's just a dumb RTMP stream out. But definitely, I would give if you can't do it again 2 days in a row, I would ping. I'd file a ticket. Zoom is pretty responsive to that. To make that work. The other thing that I would strongly consider is this is where building something in Zoom ISO and building something a little bit more complex might give you a much better show, even if you're using something just software, OBS or Vmix or Mimo Live or Ecamm. All of those things can bring those in software if you don't want to get the hardware for it, and produce a much better show. And those will all stream as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Foonstock Dorji. Sorry about that, Foonstock. From Dharamshala, India. Greetings. I have been trying to download a .mov 38 gigabyte file since this morning on my Windows 10 laptop. He tried Edge and Firefox to little avail. What could be the reason?
Go, Jeffrey.
There's so many unknowns that we don't know that could be the problem here. First of all, we don't know what type of laptop you have. We don't know how much storage you have. Well, we don't know what the network connection is, and that is the network connection on your laptop versus the internet connection that you have. A 38 gigabyte movie is sometimes, if you've got a very slow internet connection, it's a very tough download because it can take days. It could even take a week in some cases. And if you have any connection, any interruption in the connection between the source and the destination, then you run into that problem of disconnecting right there. So the biggest thing is make sure that you have 38 gigs on your computer ready to go. Make sure that you have, if you're running Wi-Fi, connect it up to your router through an Ethernet cable. You're going to have a better option that way, and then be able to just meter out your internet to make sure that you can handle a 38 gigabyte file download.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, probably it's because the file's too big. A lot of services, a lot of ISPs limit the size of a download file to prevent piracy. And also Windows, has file limit sizes. As long as you're storing it onto an NTFS segment, that should be okay. But remember, FAT32 is limited to 4 gigabytes in size, so you can't create a file more than 4 gigabytes. A lot of times it'll divide it up if it has to. Try and use an FTP server of some sort to get it down. That might help somewhat because it does error checking and it is designed for downloading larger files. If you're leaving it up to your ISP's tools, they may prevent it, something that large from coming down. And like Jeffrey says, 38 gigabytes could take a long time if it's an MOV file. If you need it in that higher resolution or whatever you're downloading needs to be that higher resolution, or if it's a 5-hour long file, I'd divide it up to make it smaller files and then try and download it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, as Jeffrey said, I mean, there's so many unknowns. It's like going into the doctor and like, doc, I'm not feeling well. What do you think's wrong with me? The easiest thing to do when diagnosing anything, aside from reboot, please tell us you rebooted and did all that stuff. Maybe even restart all your networking equipment. But anything that you can test with another thing helps you identify what the bad thing is. So if you have another computer, are you getting the same results? Most likely, my hunch is that it is the source. So whether that's simply a website, depending on if this is from a client versus some movie sharing site or something like that. And sometimes it's the individual file. So can you find something similarly large from that same source and try and download that? Obviously, if you have another computer, that would be great. If you have a friend that can try because they're on a completely different network, so then okay, is it them or is it me? I mean, I've even seen YouTube, of all places, certain videos just have problems playing back. They always get stuck at the same spot, and every other video works fine. So there are a number of things that always comes down to process of elimination.
Yeah, there's what you want to look for, the issue most likely. We're going to assume that you have enough CPU, you have enough drive, you have a relatively good internet connection, and you're still having trouble. A 38 gig file without a managed downloader is pretty complicated. So frame.io, for instance, is really designed for that. It's much more robust as far as bringing that kind of thing down, as an example. But you may find trouble downloading a lot of these things without fiber. One thing you may want to look at is an HTTP downloader. An HTTP downloader there's a variety of plugins and so on and so forth for Chrome that will go in. It'll open up multiple connections. It will also, it's a little bit more robust as far as if it can resume, so it knows where it's left off. That's the key. The 38 gigs is just a long download, and our internet connection is usually not very good. We just don't notice it because it just keeps recovering all the time. And so if you use an HTTP downloader, you can do that. You can also, you can use a command line. If you have a Mac or a Linux, you can use command line and use, there's a wget and curl that you can actually pull some of those things down directly from a command line, and that's going to be a lot more robust than simply downloading the file from a page. And I'm assuming that you don't have access to a FTP, because FTP clients, there's a lot of them that can recover. So like on the Mac, there's Transmit, and Transmit will recover a file that it didn't download properly. It will keep on recovering as it goes through. But you need something that has some recoverability as it works through it. Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
I just want to mention we got a little more information from him in another question, that it's on Google Drive. Laptop is NTFS, Windows 10, internet connection is 200 Mbits. We have seen, if you have a VPN on, we have seen really bad performance from Google Drive into any of the AWS data centers, because they try to mitigate some risks there. So that might be one pointer to look at, and Google Drive sometimes has just horrible download performance.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting anything on Google Drive or Dropbox that is more than about 4 gigs. I just think that anything over that, it becomes really unstable. It's just not, it's built as, it's really a consumer file transfer solution. So, so if there's any way that you have a person that has it, remember that you can get a service like frame.io that is, I think at 38 gigs, it's the free service. You can get somebody to upload it there. It's going to upload a lot faster and download a lot more stably than Google or Dropbox, Google Drive and Dropbox, which are we try to keep out of production. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Ian Alford in London, and Ian asks, what are the cheapest single-lens reflex cameras we could get away with using for low-budget church live streaming into an ATEM for 1080p on YouTube? We have quite low light on some parts of the stage.
Go ahead, Jonas.
At my church, we use the Panasonic Lumix G7 or G7D, depending on where you live. 7D is for Europe and 7 is for the US. So take a look at that. And we have really great luck with them. They're super cheap. You can get them on MPB, which is like a used market sale, in used conditions. But if you buy it as new or as good as new, it's almost we have never had an issue. And they are great cameras. They're micro four thirds. They have a micro HDMI out. So go to Amazon, buy 10 micro HDMI to HDMI little adapters. If you have just like this one. Don't buy any cables. Like get this one that just converts it. Tape it to your camera, and that's what we use. And we have had really great success with them. If you have a super low light stage, you can think about like some cheaper, faster lenses that are not as that aren't zoomed for the Micro Four Thirds, but it works quite okay. Everything else will be quite a bunch more expensive.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, for starters, I would stay away from any DLSRs. I'm guessing what you're thinking is more along the lines of mirrorless, like as Jonas said. You can get a used Sony A6000 for a couple $100. Similar concept. But if you're looking to just get cheap, save money, one thing you could also look at is something like the Marshalls or the Adas, which will give you an HDMI camera for $250, $300, and it's not super high quality, but it's cheap and gives you a pretty decent quality.
Go, Jeffrey.
For a camera, yeah, I would definitely, especially if you're doing this for a church and you got volunteers, you might want to think about going to something like a handy cam that can also handle low light, and you don't have to worry about lenses or anything like that. But the other thing is, if you do get an SLR, make sure that you get one that has a clean feed out. Because otherwise you'll have, like the VU meters over here and then the resolution over here. So Canon T-Series usually is the lower end Canon ones. But the cheapest solution would probably be try and figure out your lighting on stage and get that fixed first, because there's only so much that these cameras can do, especially from that far of a distance. And putting a little bit more light on the stage not only helps your feed, but also helps, if there's a congregation, see the stage. So lighting would be my first way to go.
Yeah, one thing also to consider, and this is taking this a little bit further, is from a variety of different denominations and religions. We've worked with some houses of worship, and one of the things that's turning out to be relatively successful is a lot of churches have multiple services. They have the 9 o'clock service and the 11 o'clock service and the 4 o'clock service in the afternoon. And one of the things that they're starting to do is do another service just for online. So instead of trying to merge these two things together, they take the same sermon and build something that is just for the online audience. And the response is, the average view time is considerably higher than the average view time on a typical house of worship stream. So you may want to think about that. It simplifies a lot of your hardware. Suddenly, cameras that wouldn't work in a large church suddenly work in a small, sanctuary or other things like that. And sometimes they're in the same sanctuary; it's just empty. And now they've brought it up. They've done some pipe and drape behind it to knock down some of the reflection, and then they have a camera or a handful of cameras, and then they also do some more interactive stuff that they can do with an online audience that they couldn't do in the physical audience. But I think that you're going to see more and more houses of worship from a variety of different denominations moving towards just making it like they have multiple sermons or multiple sessions. They make one of them online rather than trying to merge it, because the hybrid experience is not great from a church. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, is up next, and he asks, is ChatGPT Plus worth the $20 a month for the 70 plugins just released under beta features? Which plugins are the most useful and worthwhile? And he has a link there.
Go, John.
Earlier this week, they added plugins into ChatGPT Plus if you're a paying member. Most important being the web interface for Bing. So they added Bing into ChatGPT 4 Plus. They had to, because Bard came out and had that built in. I played with it for the last couple of days, and it's super slow. The integration of Bing into ChatGPT, it's really slow on its results, and it fails a lot of times. As far as the plugin goes, you remember CD-ROMs when CD-ROMs came out on the market, and all these people tried to shovelware their stuff onto a CD, which was a giant failure. That's kind of what I'm seeing with all these plugins. Most of them are superfluous and do nothing more than what they do on their websites already. There's a couple of interesting ones in there. Wolfram is a welcomed addition. Visla is the only interesting one that I've seen, which is basically taking stock videos and creating stock videos for you out of the can, which the results were underwhelming. So I am not really seeing anything of value there yet.
I think ChatGPT Plus by itself is worth $20 a month, which I pay for. It's very responsive. I have it. I use it all. I use it all the time. so it's to think about things and to work on things. The new thing that I've done now is I give basic descriptions to ChatGPT and say, write me a prompt for Midjourney, and then post it into Midjourney, and the Midjourney stuff turns out much better. so that's that's what I've been using a lot of it. But I just have it just describe things for me or tell me something, and then I don't take it for the truth, but I take it as those are things to think about, or here's some things, and I go out and then Google search and jump on things. But it lets me kind of get a semi-accurate 10,000-foot view of something that I can use to start my journey of trying to learn how to do something. So I think it's definitely worth it. I think that, as John said, the plugins are worthless. So almost all of them are worthless in my opinion. But the ChatGPT itself is really powerful. The only last thing I'll say is that I've been working with a couple of organizations that are taking LLMs and focusing them on all of their content. So all of their books, all of the writings of one specific person, all of those things. It is stunningly powerful. It blows my mind to be able to take 50 books, take all that text and push it into it, and then just be able to ask it questions and have it. What it's doing is it's returning, in one case, it returns a plain English answer and then gives me all the references that it used to build that plain answer. So I get it, and then I immediately can research it, and it's far more powerful than anything I saw with ChatGPT. I mean, for specific verticals, unbelievable. I mean, it's just really powerful. Next question.
Chris Sabato here in the panel from Albany, Oregon asks, I need to output QLab into an SDI system. Should I use the built-in HDMI output of the Mac or get a DeckLink card in an enclosure?
Go, Jonas.
I would always, if you can, use the SDI output just because of the little orange dot in the top right corner of the Mac. Except if you're 1,000% sure you will never ever need any live input into QLab, you can disable its microphone activity, and you will never have anything on that Mac that will ever try to use a microphone or looks like trying to use a microphone that would pop that up. So like in a worst case, you can disable the microphone access for QLab, but be aware that also prevents video live input. So keep that in mind. But other than that, you could on a hinge get away with the HDMI otherwise. Yeah, I would try to get a DeckLink. Or even better, if you only need one output, look at the Ultra Studio display, which is like a Thunderbolt 1 channel for $150. It's a really great device.
Jonas, how do you disable audio and video on QLab such that it doesn't give us the evil orange dot?
I haven't done it myself, but apparently you can go into the security settings on macOS, go in there and remove the microphone permission, which then makes it fail and not super happy about live input. That's why you can't use live inputs anymore. Yeah, it's not great. It's a horrible solution, but
it's a horrible. The orange dot was a horrible idea. Now go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I do need to bring in a live input. So I guess that kind of answers my question. And so any live input is gonna give that orange dot, regardless of
on HDMI out. Not on SDI out.
On the HDMI out, yeah. Okay. Well, that answers that question.
I would just get the Ultra Studio Monitor 3G. It's one channel SDI out and HDMI out. It's the same, but that way you can get a clean SDI or HDMI out for $150. They're really cool devices.
Yeah, because I need to bring in a signal too. So that's why I was thinking the DeckLink is that I can bring one in and one out, and I've got two extra, but.
Yeah, I did talk to someone who knew a fair bit about this, and they said, well, if you're a professional that cares about the orange dot, you should use a professional output, which is an SDI output. That was the response. So anyway, that might be part of the situation. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says one of the reasons policymakers claim that AM radio is important for public safety is that it is, quote, more resilient. With modern broadcasters relying heavily on IT infrastructures, wouldn't those infrastructures still be a point of vulnerability?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think maybe it's different now. The emergency broadcast system used to be arranged on AM stations, clear channel stations. So there are certain stations across America that are designated clear channel. There are no other radio stations on those channels within reachable area of those transmitters, or even beyond the reachable area of those transmitters. So those are designated as primary EBS stations, and other stations have equipment that monitors those frequencies in case of an emergency and will trip off devices in the studio for broadcasters and FM and so on. So the means of distributing that emergency broadcast information can be over AM radio. So even if phone lines go down or switching stations go down or the internet goes down, you'll still have that radio to communicate. Whether it is communicating to the general public or not, that remains questionable as to whether removing an AM radio from your Tesla is a problem, because then you wouldn't be able to hear the direct messages. You'd still probably be able to hear FM transmissions of people that are relaying that emergency information. And a lot of times, and I was on the air when the phony emergency notification came out in the early 70s, I think it was, that was supposed to be just a test, and they put the wrong tape up, and it comes in over teletype. So they're not depending on the internet. They're depending upon this network. Depends on closed telephone lines between the broadcast stations and the emergency broadcast network. So it wouldn't be affected, I don't believe, by IT infrastructure very much. Maybe I'm wrong these days. Maybe somebody else who's worked more in radio now can tell us.
Go ahead, Jonas.
This is, Douglas, you're talking about content creation. In a worst case emergency, we'll just drive people to the place where they can plug in a microphone and start transmitting. So the IT infrastructure is a vulnerability. But what they are also talking about is the distribution of it. And their old radio still is really good, because you need to send one signal out and it can be received by everyone without you needing to send a packet to every one of those receivers. That's a big difference still for emergency communications. The load doesn't change with how many people are tuning in. So yes, there is still a point on the content creation, but I'm sure that in a case of emergency, someone will be getting driven there physically and do it from there, so that won't be an issue. But the distribution aspect is also really important, and there is where, like Courtney said, if the internet goes down, that's harder to recover. You rely on more infrastructure on the distribution if you use the digital versions of or like internet versions of radio.
I go, Jeffrey.
Even if FM goes down, I mean, if you think about it, I looked at the radio stations in my market, and the FM stations are 6 times more than what my AM stations are, just in my area alone. So there's more opportunity to have a channel. And I know that if you're driving on the highway, most states have an emergency channel, and they'll have it on an FM station. They'll have it on an AM station as well. So if you can't get to one, you'll be able to get to the other just as easily. So there's a lot of different ways. Even if you had something, like the old radio in the basement, the little hand crank type radio that does AM and FM, you'll get a chance, you'll get an opportunity to hear what's going on with whatever the issue is. So maybe the better thing to do is to limit the AM spectrum for any type of commercial radio stations, and then still have AM as an option of some sort in vehicles.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
I just think the number of people who can access AM radio is continually diminishing really fast. My son is 30, and I don't think he's ever listened to AM radio in his life, and I'm not sure he has a device that could accept AM radio. Not that it isn't cheap and you couldn't do it, but it's just not the way people listen to things. So for public safety, I question it.
I don't think you should turn it off. I think they should leave it in, and they should stop trying to, keep on reselling all of this bandwidth. We should probably leave that there. Most cars can still pick it up, so you could go into your car and get AM radio if you needed it. There's always the, risk is the chance of something going wrong multiplied by the consequences, and the consequences of not having a way to get to most consumers is extremely high if something went wrong. So that even though the risk is very low, the consequences would be catastrophic. And there'd always be still some people that could get onto that, could transmit it into those those frequencies, regardless of whether the IP infrastructure was there. Next question.
Bart Gaffney in Economock. Is there a coating to create a 60-40 or 70-30 teleprompter surface on acrylic plexiglass? Long story short, I'm using a Pepper's Ghost gimmick for a children's show.
Go ahead, Courtney.
If you're not going to shoot a camera through it, if it's a big piece of glass or a big piece of plexiglass, you can go to a window company, and usually they'll sell this tint, which is a Mylar type of window film that you can apply directly to large pieces of glass or to acrylic plexiglass. They sell it by the sheet. You apply it, you wet it, apply it with water, and squeegee it out, and you can get it in a one-way mirror type of film. So that would let you, if you light up the behind the glass, it'll show through. If you don't light it up, then it looks like a mirror. So if you want to do a Pepper's Ghost kind of thing, something like that could work. Teleprompter glass is going to be far too expensive if you're trying to do a big sheet of glass to do a Pepper's Ghost on stage or something.
Yeah, there's a company called Tap Plastics here in California. I don't know how widely it's used, but you can just buy the plastic with it already, with the mirroring already on it from Tap Plastics. It's not very expensive. Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida, and here on the panel, when lighting a face for video, for example, appearing on this very panel, why is it typically configured with a key light and a fill light instead of identical light evenly distributed on both sides of a person's face?
It's not that it hasn't been done. Jill Greenberg got really well known for it. She's a very famous photographer, or fairly famous. She had a moment of being a famous photographer because she did exactly what you're talking about. In fact, we had clients that asked for the Jill Greenberg lighting, which was two big sources on either side that didn't have a lot of fill in the center. And it looks a little scary. And go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, search under clamshell lighting. That's really that approach. The real answer is because what we're trying to do with lighting a person for video is to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional plane. So the fact that you can see shadows, like the shadow below my nose here, gives you the cue that my nose is sticking out from my face. So really sculpturing a face so that it appears more natural and three-dimensional is the reason we use three-point lighting and things like that. And getting away from that, I've always found that kind of clamshell or broad lighting works really great for really good-looking people.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Bill's right. It's used for, it's more dramatic lighting. If you have a key and a fill ratio, it gives you more drama in the scene. Women fashion photography, and women of a certain age like to have the ring light or the light surrounding the lens coming from both sides of the lens because it eliminates all shadows and wrinkles. So you don't see the wrinkles because everything looks very flat. But it has a very flat, ghosty look to it. And then you have to add dimension by adding a brighter backlight or a rim light just to give it some dimension, because the face will look so flat and featureless that I don't really like the look of ring lighting. And I had a DP that I worked with once. I was a sound mixer, and he had a tendency of shooting commercials. He would build this wall of foam core reflecting, and he'd cut a little hole in it for the camera to stick through. And this wall would extend up and over the talent and underneath the talent and to the sides of the talent. It was a giant parabolic reflector. Try and record sound, get a microphone in there and somehow record the sound reflecting off of that. It was not good for me.
Go ahead, Jonas.
It's interesting with lighting. You almost always try to, if you aren't after a specific look, you're trying to get back to reality. So our brain and our species is trained to have one really big light source and something else that it bounces off, like the sun and something else. So if you aren't looking at someone who's like facing the sun and looking at it, you will always have that type of look because you have the light sideways. That's one of the reasons why it feels natural if we light that way.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So my takeaways clearly from what Bill said, first of all, is I definitely want that inconsistency then. And so that's fascinating. I didn't know that it was what this all boils down to is the psychological non-conscious cues that we get from the lighting. I didn't know if it was a technical or dated back to just, old lamps, bulbs, and the main one was too expensive, so we just used this cheaper one. Or so that's fascinating. Okay, thank you guys.
Everything is psychological. It's just whether you notice it or not. So we have, those things. One of the things that we oftentimes, we do also try to standardize it so that a lot of people are mostly lit from the front, because when you group everybody together, you see this in broadcast television. We have, when I bring in film DPs, they always want to create dramatic lighting where it's that big key and a fill. And that person on broadcast always looks goofy because they just look like they're trying too hard, because because it's not just like this is their face. The other advantage of going up at an angle like this is because a lot of us have a little extra skin down here, maybe a little skin filled with a little bit of fat. So by having it come down at an angle, we start to cut out our chin, with a shadow. So we cover up some of that double chin with that angle. So usually what we try to do is take that light and go up until we stop seeing. You want to see the highlights in someone's eyes when they're looking at the camera. So you go up as high as you can, where you still see those highlights, and then that starts to frame the face with the bones in their chin as opposed to the skin in their neck. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, here's a good example we all remember from Star Trek. The Captain Kirk splash of light across his. Whenever he was going to announce something really serious, they'd cut to him and they'd have that slash of light across his face, just for dramatic effect.
Next question.
Next question comes from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. And Kenny says, I want to talk over shared video on Zoom, but cannot. Using a Magewell interface to share, Zoom treats this as a camera and switches the audio sources, eliminating the main camera audio during share. How do I fix this?
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, now maybe I'm missing a piece of this that maybe is obvious to some of the others, but if it's going through that interface, if the camera is going into that, then it is now being seen as an HDMI source, which of course can have audio. And if it's going to that, not directly to the computer, then the computer doesn't know that's a USB device. Mm-hmm. Vice versa, if it is, then it may be auto switching to that audio source, but it shouldn't have eliminated it from Zoom. And then you should still be able to always select a different video and audio device. And then I guess lastly, if you're relying on going through the audio of the camera, that's never great. So, an inexpensive separate microphone will solve lots of problems, including that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
There might be a couple of things that are happening there. You might be right that but you're trying to switch a camera to the Magewell input, and that also causes Zoom to switch. I haven't seen that behavior before, so that would be even stranger to me. What you might also be doing is sharing the Magewell input as a second camera through screen sharing and clicking the optimize for video in that. That will also enable audio. If Zoom is getting any audio twice, it will start to put one down, and it might cause you the Zoom auto noise removal and echo removal to not hear you at all anymore. So that would be something I would look into. And then also check on the Magewell device if you're using that for everything and you're switching on that and suddenly Zoom isn't getting the audio, that there isn't an audio follows video mode enabled, and something like that could also be the source of this issue.
Yeah, both of those will coexist if you have share audio in your screen share. And I think it's in the advanced menu is where you can share audio. So you can have a second audio input, and then that will be not considered part of that mix. The other way to do it on you can do it on both Mac and PC. I think you use some fruit or vegetable to mix the audio. I think it's tomatoes or potatoes or something like that. On the PC and on the Mac, you'd use Loopback, and then you take both of those inputs and you merge them together inside of Loopback or Audio Hijack. Now you have full control over that. The other thing you can possibly use if you're doing that kind of thing is Sound Desk by Loud Lab. We've been playing with it a lot, where you can now have a full live mixer of all your inputs coming in, and now you're mixing everything together. That's really the pro way to do this, is to find a way that you're going to have those mixes coming in, and then finding a piece of software or hardware that you can mix those and match them so that they're not two different sources going into Zoom, but one source that you have external control over. The next question.
Next one comes to us from Bobby Grandone in Westbury. I have a Lumix GH4. Has anybody used this mirrorless camera as a webcam?
Go, Jonas.
Yeah, it's a great camera for that. have any HDMI to USB adapter, and then use these great. You can get a power adapter that you put in where your battery normally goes, and then it keeps on running. We have a couple people on the panel who are using the GH4 still, and it's still a good camera for that.
Next question.
Jason Roberts Shaw in Sarasota, Florida is back with options for colorful background access lighting that can be controlled by a Stream Deck. Options in addition to nano leafs, and what do the panelists recommend?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So you're seeing the nanoleaves behind me right now, and those are a good option. Then on the left, for my curtain, I have one of the Elgato LED strips mounted above, so I can throw my Stream Deck, and it's even cooler with the Stream Deck Plus. You can go in there and you can change colors, and now it looks more natural, or you can choose a different color. That has been really cool. It's a little more expensive than your typical ones, but it is really great integrated with the Stream Deck and allows you to create the scene that you want really nicely. I really like mine.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the Elgato strip lights are probably going to be the best integrated to the Stream Deck because they're trying to create that infrastructure. So you buy all Elgato stuff. Philips has the Philips Hue lights, which are Edison-style bulbs that you can put into lamps and use them that way. Govee makes a strip lights that also connect up. They've started doing what's called Matter, which is a universal system for different types of devices, whether it be a personal device or a personal assistant device like a Echo or a Google Home or anything like that, to doing over the air and being able to bring in your own commands via API. You can also use IFTTT, but be warned, when you do that, you're going to be going out to the internet and coming back in. And sometimes the delay on that could be, upwards to a few minutes to finally turn on your lights. So those are some of the options right there that I have.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm just using a cheap option. I'm using these Fate, F-E-I-T, color-changing bulbs that are Wi-Fi enabled. You just plug them into a socket. You can control them through an app that comes with them or through Google Home or the A-Lady. So you can do it with that. I don't know whether there's a plug-in to use it with Stream Deck or not. Maybe Stream Deck has an interface to a Alexa or Google Home that would allow you to control things on those networks.
I'll go ahead, Jeff.
One little tip, by the way, if you are going to try and integrate or rely on IFTTT, then I would suggest getting a paid pro account. It, among other features, it gives you much faster and guaranteed, when it works, guaranteed response time. So they're much more responsive than if you're just doing it with a free account.
Next question.
Next one's in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. Is there a percentage of watt capacity on an uninterruptible power supply that you don't cross? For example, if your UPS has a 1200 watt capacity, you don't plug in more than 1,000 watts.
My general rule I find useful here too is 40 to 60%. Like that's what you want to be at. You don't want to cross 60% on purpose. On a UPS. So generally, if you start seeing it going over 60%, get another UPS, figure out what needs to be on it. In a pinch, you can go ahead and do that if you really need to have it there for momentary. But by doing that, what happens is that you're looking at that UPS and some things turn on, some things turn off, the fans turn on, the fans turn off, all kinds of other things happen, and you end up with surges on the UPS that are going to go over that cap. So usually, like for instance, we have these elementals, and when they turn on, they just massive, they turn everything on. And so what we want to do is look at our UPS when that startup cycle is happening to see what it's actually using there. But I would stick with 40 to 60% capacity is what you should be. That's your nominal for a UPS. And then if you do that, you won't have any surprises. And it lasts a little longer too. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. A simple little question here. How can comedy be conveyed and delivered on Zoom? Talking stand-ups and sitcoms.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think that's mostly an issue with the person doing it and not the audience. I mean, it even works over non-linear ways where you are watching it on demand. So I think the problem most of the time is that the performers don't feel the same way while performing to an empty screen. So that's where Zoom can come in, and it's really great for them to see people reacting to them. So I think it's actually more for the performer than for the audience.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I would actually argue the other point, which is, I mean, it does take, the performer has to be good and has to be funny. Certainly they rely on cues from the audience, but we also, the viewers of that comedy, rely heavily on the response of our peers. When you're in the audience, you know, usually if no one is laughing, you're not going to just bust out laughing, and vice versa. If everyone's laughing, you know, you just get that subtle cue that, oh yeah, that is funny. And so if someone is performing and you hear no audience, you know, every single joke that probably is funny, but it just sounds like crickets in the room, it won't appear as funny. I mean, it's why sitcoms, of course, always have that damn laugh track in there, because there's no audience, you know, doing that usually. But that's kind of that subtle psychological cue that, oh yeah, that was funny.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, has anyone ever experimented with 3D modeling tools on iOS devices like ShapeYard? He's got a link there to it.
Yeah, I haven't found any of these to be very fun to use. They're just a really small screen to try to do 3D modeling. Maybe it's because I've done 3D modeling on big screens, but I found it a little painful. So anyway, so I think that I haven't been able to kind of turn that corner. I have ShapeYard on my phone. I was just trying to find it while in the last question. They're trying to figure things out, and then I remembered why I didn't use it. It's just that it's just cumbersome to try to do that right now. Next question.
Comes from Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. It takes a lot of clicks to get to the office hours breakout room and pin it. Is there a way to shortcut this?
Not that we know of right now. There's no deep links to individual rooms. Next question.
Bart Gaffney and Economowak. Inexpensive do-it-yourself playback deck capable of 2 to 3 simultaneous streams, controllable via QLab, Companion, and Stream Deck.
I think that I would probably say multiple copies of PlayOpy. Like that's if you're looking for something to do that. I mean, I think that it's a playback deck. You'd have simultaneous streams. I mean, you have relatively inexpensive pieces of hardware. It doesn't have a lot of overhead, and you'd be able to control it through. I think you'd be able to control it through all of those things. Is that right, Jonas?
Yeah, you should be able to just send HTTP commands from all of them, or TCP commands to the Hyperdeck thing. Yeah, you might be even able to launch multiple on one system if you do a little around digging. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, again, if you have a deck link card, I mean, it's not the most inexpensive, then something like QLab will do all of those things. Like, it'll just push all of those things out. But if you have some inexpensive pieces of hardware, it could be a little, I have this little Melee, these little PCs, or the problem is that the PCs and the Raspberry Pis and the Macs at Costco are all the same price right now. so I would normally say Raspberry Pis, but they're so expensive at the moment. So anyways, but I think that having a couple of those, I would rather have a couple devices firing off playbacks than one device trying to fire them all off personally, just because it gives you a little bit of redundancy. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. I'm going to be moving into an apartment very soon, and I'm interested in setting up my studio IT lab. Would it be best course of action to offer to pay for running the Ethernet cables myself and have the cables stay with the unit when I leave?
Go, Jeffrey.
If you're talking about running the cables in the wall, then most apartment complexes will not let you do that. They'll have to have their own maintenance staff take care of that to bring it in, because especially when you leave, they got to account for where those cables are and how they are. And then, of course, there's that whole, is it my cable or is it your cable type situation? And you don't want it. So basically, you're going to have to talk to maintenance about setting it up. You can set up a lab using cables, and if you can affix things to the wall via screws, and even you can do the double-sided tape, and just getting those little rails that that you can take a cable and then run it through the rail, so it hides the cable and then puts it through the wall or on the wall, so you can easily take it off when you move out.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next. What's a good choice for a MagSafe protective case for an iPhone for Android? Android.
Go, Jeff, real quick.
I'll give you the Apple one, which is just, to give you one simple recommendation that will work. You don't have to worry about it, is Apple. I mean, it can't account for taste, but functionally it will work perfect with MagSafe.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, for Android, I will give you Peak Design. It's a little expensive, I think, for a case in their ecosystem, but I think it's fantastic.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. And Douglas says, Moog Music has reintroduced the Mini Moog Model D with the exact same design as the 1970 era Mini Moog. Considering the panoply of clones and emulation, is this just a collector's product? And he's got a link there.
Panoply. What a good use of panoply. Anyway, go ahead,
Panoplay. Well, I would say, there's as you say, there are lots of clones. One I have and one Alex has is the Poly D from Behringer.
Yeah.
That's it on the left there, and that's the Mini Moog on the right. You'll see that the Mini Moog has 8 more keys on it than the Poly D, but the Poly D has 1 more oscillator than the Mini Moog does. And I've heard comparisons between the Mini Moog and the Poly D, and it's really hard, if not impossible, to tell the difference between the two of them. So if you're just doing it for the sound, I'd go with the cheaper, Poly D or one of its clones than to go for the Mini Moog. There's just prestige in the Moog name, so you're paying a lot for that label on there when there are a lot of other options that can sound almost the same and give you a little more versatility.
Yeah, I think I don't think I'd go on stage with a Behringer unless I was like I would go on stage with a Moog, and if I had clients, I'd have the Moog. I think that but for home, I'm very happy with the Poly D. I think that it does a great job at what's there, and I think it has more. I think the Poly D has more outputs than the Moog. I think on the back. So maybe it's a different synthesizer that I have, because there was one that I had. It's the RD8. The RD8 has a lot more channels than the original 808. So it's something that's interesting. Anyway, we're now changing subjects to our second hour and talking about the $10,000 studio. So there was a back and forth about whether it should be $10,000 or $5,000. We've decided to land at $10,000, so we got a little more headroom on it. And so but the idea is that we might show you things that are $5,000 that you can get everything together there. But really, what we're talking about, I think, is when we start talking about these kinds of numbers. When we talk about less than 1,000, we're talking about basic. I just want to make things work. If what we do starts to become your business, then you start wanting to spend more money. If you're gonna, so this is more of a entry level, what I would say is entry level business connection. And so you're a C-suite. You do what we do for a living. You are serious about what those things are. Then you want to start. You're going to start spending more money on those systems. And so I think that is where we start talking about what the budgets are and how we put those things together. And we can get a lot for $5,000 or even $10,000. And so if you've got questions about that or comments, or you want to tell us what you're using there, let us know. And it doesn't have to be all the way up to 10,000. I think that we could do a fairly solid setup for 5,000, but we decided to go ahead and jump the gun and go all the way to 10. So we'll talk about some of the lights and process that we used. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I'd like to show you my studio, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch over here. This is my studio. This is, believe it or not, this is a completely portable studio. In fact, I've moved this studio 3 times in my career here. And right now it's sitting in what I call Studio B. I'm in Studio A, which is basically my production thing. So I could actually have somebody else sitting at that seat down there, and I could be doing the production up here, which is the coolest thing. But that's going to that's going to probably go past the $10,000 realm here. So the brick wall that you see behind you is actually all hardware store bought. And once again, it can be dismantled and then moved and then put up.
And what kind of brick wall? What is it made of?
It's just this is just paneling, like wood paneling you would get for a house. You could get bricks, and you could get white brick. You can get, it depends on which hardware store, what they carry. You can also go online. I know these brick walls came from Home Depot.
And are they actual? Is it plastic or is it brick?
No, it's wood. So so basically what I did was with this, it's a form of wood, I guess. So they have on the back of them, they have braces, and then they have feet. I don't know if I can zoom in on the feet from there, but basically everything that's in there, you saw one of the screws in one of the bricks. Let's zoom in on that again really quick. There's a screw. They're about $30 a panel.
And how big is the panel?
And it's 8 by 4, if I remember correct. But if you go places panel. If you go to Home Depot or something like that, you can have them cut to your specification. In fact, I had them cut these panels. I had them cut 4 by 4 because I wanted to put a little bit of distress on them, so you can see like a little line there that makes it look like somebody's repaired some bricks. And then, of course, I put over here, which is being easily covered by the shelving system there. These bricks right here is where the seam is. So what I did was I cut the bricks in the pattern and then took the top row of the bricks and then covered them. And then I'm using it's a clay foam. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's meant for set direction. So if you're building sets, you get this clay foam, and you can then mold it in and then color it. You can paint it and make it look so it looks like I said, somebody basically needed to repair the brick wall, which I like a lot. And then of course these little hexagon things, these are all 3D printed. And I love that because of my 3D printer on there. Now, going for the main set, because as a lot of people know that I do a lot of YouTube stuff. So I have all PTZ cameras in my studio, and one's over the shoulder, and one, of course, I'm controlling the other one. I also have an overhead, which is not a PTZ, and I'll show you that in a second. These are about $1,600 per camera, including the NDI. You can also have an HDMI, and then it does SDI as well. The cool thing about this one is if I was to turn on this TV right here, the HDMI goes straight to the TV. The NDI is coming into, in this case, Vmix. So you can, so I can watch and then also project it in the back. TV, so I've had it for a few years. It's about $100, $150. It's not 4K, but once again, for a background TV, you don't need 4K. You just need something that's not going to have too much of a reflection in the screen, and of course positioned right. So with that, I also bought a TV stand from Amazon, and then I had to reconfigure it so it would tilt down just a little bit. And then lighting, all my lighting is Neewer lighting. This is a LED fabric panel right there. That's the one that's not on. And then I have my overhead, which goes down to the table, and I'll show you that really quick. There's the overhead camera. That's the Avaya. It's basically a USB camera and an HDMI camera. And with that, I have the HDMI camera that's going also into NDI through a Magewell capture device, and then brings that in. So with that all said and done, and of course you can see those van pads or moving pads pretty much nailed to the roof, so I get less of the air vents, because you have to worry about, if you're in the basement, you have to worry about those air vents if they're exposed, because they'll come up and vibrate on you. Microphone is I have the Heil PR40. This goes into a Mac Mini M1. And the screen on the left, that's actually the ViewSonic touch screen. So I actually have a touch screen ability in my studio. So with all that said and done, that probably comes to about, it's tough to say because I've been doing this for a few years now, and but we would hit about the $10,000, maybe $12,000 mark when you bring in the table. The table is an Ergotron sit-stand desk itself, and then of course there's some extra stuff that I didn't show because it's tough to show in the studio. Behind that camera that I showed you is a Vizio 50-inch TV, which is my monitor, so I can see what's going on. And then, of course, power supply. The network has to be PoE, so it controls the camera, so I don't have all these cords running through the studio, and just little bits and pieces. So I'd say it's a little bit above $10,000, but $10,000 mark can be easily achieved with a lot of these systems if you were to build it nowadays.
Yeah, and I know this isn't really show your own studio, but I think a lot of ours are kind of in the sub $10,000 range. Mine looks a little bit like this. This is so what you're looking at here is I like monitors. I don't like curved monitors, but I like lots of them, and I get them all 24-inch so that they all kind of fit together. I put everything on arms so that I can kind of swing things in and out. So I swing the monitors, move them around, move them in, move them out, and kind of keep them, working there. Now I don't have an expensive desk. I have a nice wooden fold-out desk. This is a standard like banquet table desk. I keep on thinking about eventually I'm going to get something better, and I just haven't because there's a bunch of stuff on it. Here's my Mac Studio. I've got a couple Mac Minis here that drive a variety of different things that I might want to cut to. This is my matrix for my HDMIs. Obviously my Extreme that I have sitting right in front of me. This is a picture from a little while ago because that keyboard got burned out because I poured coffee on it. I use a trackball. This is the one that I think Bill uses. I copied it from Bill. It was just easier to not take up space where I had to move my hand. So that's why I kind of moved to a trackball there. There's one of my Stream Decks that's there that I that's with the little encoders. There's my teleprompter. Everything above here is all MakerPipe. So I built this frame in MakerPipe, and then I bought this. This is like $15, and just hung it in there. What I did do to make it work is I folded it so that it would have a little bit more thickness, and then I applied grommets to it, and it was so I have it's just thin enough so that I can use the kind of the pliers grommets as opposed to the hammer grommet, which I had an unfortunate experience with in the past. So anyway, and then behind this, there's three Nanlite 100s, the B 100Bs. So these are bicolor 100s that are kind of pulled back a little bit of way, so I get a nice safe one. Now I will say that I'm about to extend this upward so that it's up here and extend it outward, so I have even a bigger light source. You can't make that light source too big, in my opinion. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. This is all moving blankets, 90-pound moving blankets. You can get ones that are black and white. It's really much better than blue because blue will make you look blue. So I get a fair bit of fill out of here. I use a Stellar X2 mic. Cannot use that mic in this room without these here because it picks up too much, and the room is all hardwood, like everything, and it's very complicated. So it picks up. This is a work table that has it goes out this way, and it has a pegboard there. So I have all my wires and everything on pegboard. This goes up. What's nice about this being higher is I can attach. This is my mic, my underslung mic arm. This is the OC White that is attached to this table, not this table, and that allows me to. That means I don't get any. You don't hear anything bouncing because it's attached to something else. This is my little telestrator. That's what I'm drawing on right now. I'm drawing on this. I'm drawing this on this. It's very meta. Anyway, and so yeah, that's pretty much my setup, and it's close. The camera I'm using is an FX30 right now, and I'm pretty happy with it as far as that goes. The shelves behind me are they're your basic Uline shelves. You can get wire shelves that are cheaper than Uline, and they are not great. so like I can just tell you, I spent some real money on the Uline ones. My Uline ones go all the way around my room to keep stuff there. If you wonder why I can run out and grab something and bring it right back, it's because there's just shelving. That's all there is here. I went cheaper and bought some stuff on Amazon for my garage, and I'm unhappy with it every day. so it's these are much stiffer than the ones that I've bought elsewhere. And that's it. There's the one thing to think about when you're thinking about a studio is how far back you have it. So this is a solid 10 feet behind me, so I get a fair bit of bokeh because I've created a lot of distance. I think that if I moved it closer, I'd want to move from an FX30 to an FX3 to go to a full frame, or FX6 or whatever, to go to a full frame sensor, or an A7 or something like that. But I'd want to go to a full sensor to shorten that depth of field. I will say that one thing that's really important, and I think people have heard me talk about it now, but since we're talking about it here, is that I did move to the Sonys because I wanted that short depth of field. And when I got this kind of short depth of field with a Blackmagic camera, it didn't matter before. So I had a gray screen behind me. Didn't matter before because I could make my I could make my f-stop anything I wanted because it's just gray behind me. When I decided I had things behind it, but I want them to be out of focus, the problem that I had is I shortened that depth of field, and then I was constantly going like this to try to stay in focus. And so the Sony fixes all of that. The autofocus is really good, and so it made it a lot easier to get this stuff done. So that's kind of my setup. We think about that. We build a lot of setups that are like this. I'll try to find some more photos to show some of the ones that we send out. Go ahead, Bill.
So I was going to show a couple of things. First of all, desk is very messy, but this is me right now. And there's some things that have changed in this. And rather than using this picture to show you kind of what's really going on, I'm going to use an older one, that picture of this setup in the place I was before because it's much brighter. So you can see I'm basically arrayed around a laptop. The laptop screen right above that is my teleprompter screen. There's a Blackmagic 6K behind there. And then the floating big Sony monitor up at the top, which I find incredibly useful because the teleprompter and my computer screen, I have them both dimmed so that I can work with them all the time. That overhead monitor is, if somebody's showing content in office hours, I often look up there because I can see things much more clearly and read small type up there much easier. So I've gotten used to having the big monitor. You'll also see in this picture 2 little monitors flanking. There's an iPhone and an iPad on there. Those have been replaced with 16-inch IPS pads that are run by run by Thunderbolt, I think. That has been really useful to me. And in fact, if I go back to this shot really quickly, even though it's not as good, you'll see that I've changed one of my monitors to vertical. I had never done that before, but I'm finding there's a lot of circumstances where vertical content is important for me. So I've gotten used to having one for scripts, and even for the office hours gallery now that is vertical, the other is horizontal. And between those two, I find it really easy to glance over and get the kinds of views of things that I need. I probably am approaching, somewhere between $7,000 and maybe $10,000 for all of this, largely because massive things like the desk. I have a Middle Atlantic desk, and you can probably see it here. That undersurface is a desk I've had for 35 years now, but it's great because it has that bridge up at the top for additional equipment, and then all the rest of the little things that are involved in that, the mic arm, the microphone, the monitors that are on the desk for when I'm listening to music or building spots and I need to hear them out in the world. There's just a whole bunch of things. And by the time you get adding incrementally over and over and over again, you're always surprised at how much you've actually spent to make everything work.
Good, Jeff.
Oh, sorry. I actually already forgot what I was going to say. Actually, when Alex, you mentioned depth and what you have, that's a great point, especially if it's vice versa, like I have here. If you're in a very small space and have virtually no depth behind you, Alex and everyone else, if you want to talk about that, but it's entirely different considerations, especially if you want to do anything with lighting. It's why I have the spill from these lights and everything else is an entirely, and then the focus, all those are a different version of that issue.
Hey, go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I was working on a picture. I was going to just take a look at that. I'm unfortunately in my living room, but I think I kind of have this studio kind of set up. It's a console I built for my Atari 800 back in 1972 that everything is glommed onto, and all of this is sitting on a rolling rack. I have my Dell is down here underneath the on the bottom part of this rolling steel. I guess it's a rolling steel, like a tray to go around, and it has a UPS underneath. The one large 23-inch monitor. I have this 8-inch HP tablet over here, which handles comms, and down here on a chair is the ATEM Mini and the sound mixer. I have one little space for my coffee mug, and my mouse is right here on a little outrigger that sticks out off of this. So there's no surface area available at all anywhere in my studio. The mic is, of course, on one of the $12 arms, and the camera, which is up here, is the Canon M50 Mark II, which works pretty well. I haven't had any problems with it. I have a backup USB camera here when this one fails. I can go to that if necessary. But and I have for lighting, which you saw here, is this Newar light, panel light that I can swing out and waste into this printer, which is sitting directly behind the camera there, so which I can't move my camera any further away because this console was built 20 years ago and it's against the wall. So that's my setup.
You go ahead, Chris.
So I'm this is not nearly high end, but like when you start putting together a studio, it gets expensive and things add up. And so like, while I would say that my setup is not high end, it's probably, when you include, if I put everything into it, it's several $1,000s. So just to kind of give you, what it looks like, it's the lights are actually an Alex Lindsay special. Alex tweeted out like, "Hey, I like these Nanlite 68Cs." And I was like, "Oh, what are these?" And they were on sale at B&H, and so I got a pair of Nanlite 68Cs, and they're just single color, but for what I'm doing, that's good enough. The camera I use is the Marshall USB. It's a USB version of the Marshall POV cameras, and again, it's better than just a Logitech C920, but it's not super high end. And I've got the laptop with the teleprompter from Video Pencil, and everything goes through Vmix, and so it's for audio. I have the MV7, but I'm using the XLR, which goes into Henry Engineering Sports Pod, which allows me to quickly mute and unmute, but it also gives me the ability to bring in a side channel, so comms go directly into my ear, and I can adjust the audio of that independently. And we don't do a lot of talking back on comms, but if we did, I could just push a button to talk back to comms, and it would mute my mic. And so that's my setup.
Yeah, and when we talk about kind of remote setups, this is one that's in that kind of ballpark for what we take out and run. So here you can see this setup here. And so what you have here is this is a 6K with a ICANN teleprompter, which is relatively small and inexpensive, and we can kind of run those in. We're using this is a Benro tripod. Only problem with this tripod is that the interface to the plate here is really tight, and it makes it hard to put it on sometimes, and there's some swearing involved to get it on. I think it's like twice the number of swear words that most plates require. We use a shotgun here. That's just a basic. I think in this case is just a Rode NT2. A Rode the NT2 version that is a shotgun. So anyway, these are 68s, exactly what was talked about before, what Chris was talking about there. And these are the ProMaster lighting stands, which is nice because they go flat and they're easy for us to define. So, and then we have a little brain in here, and that brain has an ATEM, a Meraki, a Mix Pre, all stuffed really tightly, into that little brain with a couple outputs. And so then this just rolls out as a snake, so that we can, put this in here. We have a little speaker in the front of here so that we can talk to people, to have that there. But this is about a $10,000 range. This is very high tech here. You can see we took these chairs because there was a lot of echo in this room. This isn't what we planned, but these are the pads for the top of the cases that hold a bunch of this stuff. And just by putting them on those chairs and setting them up there, if you're wondering why those chairs are there, it's not part of the design. It's just that room happened to be really roomy. And we found that putting those two there cut down a lot on the reflection. So anyway, what this is designed for is actually to have one of us talk to the person on the other side. So our client never came to the location. We just get on the internet. They jump in over Zoom. We're recording full quality, video from that camera, but they're able to have that conversation with the person. So having this kind of a remote kit that we can take out and have that control, and still we're getting 6K, Blackmagic RAW records for that interview, but it also makes a pretty good setup for just having a conversation. And it's relatively mobile. It's a couple Pelican cases. I think it's two or three Pelican cases to get it all together. So, and during COVID, we built these we actually sent them to people for, that they had to build themselves. So we had instructions on how to put them together. All right, let's go to the next question.
The next question comes to us from John Preto in Las Vegas. Tom Ferguson's 10K studio package. We have a graphic that Sabato will show off.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It's me, Alex.
Yeah, it's John.
Oh, sorry. Chris has got the graphic. Okay.
I got a call from Tom yesterday. He's not feeling well today, but he put a lot of work into this and sourcing it exactly at $10,000, $9,995.
There we go.
And so on the video section, FX30, everybody seems to love this camera, and it's specking out great. A lot of people are switching over. He's using the Sony FE24 to 70 f.28 GM2. It's great lens. And then for a rear cam, he's calling this the rear camera. He's Insta360, and then using the Osbet UVC to get that back to HDMI to feed into the.
And the one challenge there is that you can't control the link.
Yeah, that's right. That is a problem. And then for audio, the Mix Pre 3 with noise assist built in it. He's got the Rolls mic switch there, MS 111 mic switch, Elgato mic arm into an ILPR 40. And then Linsol KZS 10s for in-ears. And then lighting is using the Godox ES 45s for key and fill. And then he's got two Godox smaller ones, CL, for a rear light and for a kicker in the back. And then the Glide Gear teleprompter TMP 100 with the Lilliput A11 there. And then computer Mac Mini M2, 4K Dell 27-inch monitor. And the only thing I don't like about Tom's situation is the little baby Apple keyboard and the horrible Mac mouse. Those are the two things that I would upgrade. The switcher, Blackmagic A10 Extreme ISO, an Apple TV. It's always good to have an Apple TV around for all kinds of inputs into this. A bunch of cables. I found just a picture off of Google there, and then miscellaneous mounts. He's got $300 for mounts and $325 for associated cables, and that totaled $9,995.
Yeah, and that's a great setup, and that really shows you why we made it 10 rather than 5 is that this is a really solid setup. Like this is you're gonna look and sound really good in that. And by the way, the Apple TV is not just for watching TV. You can of course use that for a super easy way to share anything. So you do AirPlay from your iPad, from your phone, from your Mac. You now have this kind of Swiss Army knife if you're a Mac user or Apple ecosystem user. You have a super easy way to just put anything into the switcher that you want. So that's the big advantage of the Apple TV, and you can watch movies. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What's the purpose of your $10,000 studio? Interview, demo, narrative? Is post gear to be included, or is it live only?
Go, Jeffrey.
Well, for me, it's I do a lot of YouTube. I do a lot of Amazon Lives and of course unboxings and first looks. So it's for my YouTube channel. But I've also done a lot of lot of stuff outside of my channels, to, like for instance, getting on office hours or anything like that. But what I like is the fact that I have my production studio now. So if I'm actually doing somebody else's show, through like ISO into creating SuperSource and things like that, I can do it from up here rather than down there, because in all reality, sometimes it gets a little bit comfortable to be sitting at your studio for hours on end.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
For me, it's just fun. I mean, it started with COVID and, wanting to look good when at work and whatnot. And I have the benefit of being able to bring some equipment home from work that we don't use anymore and stuff like that to kind of add to it. But it's just fun. It's fun to play around and tweak things and make things better.
Go ahead, Bill.
For me, this is my living. It's a combination of content creation. I'm predominantly an editor, so I spend a lot of my time editing work for clients. So they send me digital files and I turn them into programs and then ship them off online and get paid for it. So that's the heart and soul of everything. So this is an income generating system. I do editing and I also do a lot of voiceover work. So the addition of an upgraded microphone and software that allows you to do recording and mastering and shipping off is the other part of how I make my living. So those are, this all surrounds. This adds a nice video layer on top of the audio work that I would have been doing all through my life anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is, we've talked about this 1,000 times, but this is the new suit and tie, and when, there's definitely people who have spent $10,000 more on their car or have a couple of suits that were expensive or have, things that they do that you use when you're, especially in a professional environment. It's not just for I'm just doing an interview or a demo, but really if you interact, I'm not showing up at your office very often, and I want to be on I want to put my best foot forward. And so a lot of times I just have this set up because that is, it definitely positions it. I strongly believe that during COVID and even after, I remember a couple of clients have just said, well, I'm really glad you're doing this. And literally they're making that decision based on this frame. Like, that if I'm going to be doing live streaming for them or I'm doing virtual events for them, I seem to know what I'm doing because I look better than they've ever seen on Zoom, and I look better because they're all on webcams, And so here I'm just keeping up with the Joneses at, when I'm on a show, when I'm on any average meeting, generally, I don't, I look much better than I do in person, in case you're wondering. So I think that is that's the real advantage from a sales perspective, from a confidence perspective. Those things make a difference. And, people will tell you, if you're doing a sales thing, people decide what they're going to dress in. They decide what car they're going to show up in, and they decide, how they're going to present the room. And in this case, that's what I'm doing every single day, and building confidence with people who are going to hire me to do this thing. So I think that if you're in this business and you're showing up with a little webcam on your camera, you're missing a pretty big opportunity. Now, again, we have the $1,000 one, which is a little bit more reasonable and get you there. But if this starts to become your business, you really do need to, up the game to be competitive. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've always had a computer console here in the corner here back into the early 80s. But it's gone through a number of different computer upgrades, but only when COVID hit and I got to be on office hours did I upgrade it to audio video production. Here I added the better camera, I added the better microphone and the ATEM. I had ATEMs, but not in my living room. I had the larger rack mount ATEM switchers, but for my work in the field, but nothing here in the living room. So I got the mini and the ISO. So it helps improve my look here. I primarily now, since I'm not writing software or doing graphics anymore for television, I don't use this console setup very often. I'm more comfortable in a easy chair over with a laptop in front of me on a tray. So I do my union meetings from this, and it's the Union of Sound and Video Engineers. And at the end of each of those meetings, which it could be about 100 people, over Zoom, I'm always voted the one with the best audio and video. So I guess I'm pretty proud of that amongst all the audio and video engineers that are in the union.
For some reason, I imagine Courtney just walking through there. Are you not entertained? Anyway, so all right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida, here on the panel. When thinking about lighting and cameras, what are the considerations if you want to have lights behind you to be visible on camera, such as the tube lights that Alex mentioned?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm going to share a picture also if you guys see this. This was, by the way, if anyone watched Zoom's AI Work Transformation Summit, videos are available for replay. Interesting stuff. This one, by the way, this guy's title is awesome. Distinguished Architect is his title. But this made me also think of Alex when you showed one time you were on the show from a hotel room and you had the lighting. So it occurred to me there's got to be some considerations that I'm not aware of having lights facing the camera. It's a cool effect, but I'm sure it has to be dealt with without blowing out then the actual person you want to focus on.
Yeah, and it's a very YouTuber thing to do. YouTube-y thing to do is to have lights in the background there, and he's using those look like the Pavo lights, Pavo tubes from Nanlite. That's what they look like there. And then of course he's got some little LEDs that are hidden under or behind the shelf. I think it's a really fun frame. I think the frame would look better if it was pushed back about 3 feet and a little bit more out of focus. It would have a very and it's a little tilted, but mine's a little tilted right now too. Every time I reset my camera. But I think that the other thing to look at is the 7Cs. I know this is going to get complicated because there's the Nanlite Pavo tubes that are 6Cs. Aperture has a 7C, which is a standard interface for a regular light that you can put in hotel rooms that have standard lights. I have been known. I take those with me and I will unscrew their lights and put them in a shelf in a little corner, and I'll put in the 7Cs. And I replace all the lights in the hotel, and I can color them with my phone, so I can sit there and kind of play with them as well. So I've done that as well, and it's been pretty effective. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and in addition, especially if you're doing unboxings or if you're looking at products and you're using a table to do that, having those lights in the right positions and in the right positions, they can actually help light the table. They can help light the product, and of course, they help light you with a little bit of key fill in the back. So you can work it from there. I've tried the Pavo tube thing. It really doesn't work for my studio, but I've used it for a couple other people, and really got them to highlight different things, not only the table, but also if they have all these knickknacks and on their shelves and things like that it could really highlight those as well.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that's key is if you're going to put lights visibly in the frame, you need either some way to dim them without creating digital noise. And when I say that, you can get into flickering, you can also get into RF. Particularly, most of the lights, the inexpensive ones, use a pulse code modulation thing where they turn the light on and off incredibly quickly to dim it. And depending on the frame rate capture of your camera, that can look horrible. So you do want to stick with lights that are dimmable successfully so that you can get your background low enough. The other thing that what I do here is I tend to use neutral density chair, leave the lights on 100% so I don't dim them at all, and then I use ND filters to bring them down into the range that I want to see so that everything in the background is not distracting. Although with that green banker's lamp next to me just has a little rheostat on it, and that's using an actual incandescent tube, so that's easy to dim successfully. But if that was an LED source or some kind of a modern source, I'd probably not be able to do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Those other lights that you just mentioned, and you've mentioned them before, are very cool. Of course, if you're putting them in the lamps at a hotel, you have to remember not to leave them there and take them.
They're expensive to leave in the hotel.
But what I'm wondering, primarily with any of this, having those lights back there, is then I've got to imagine there's some considerations either for what features or capability a camera has to have, and or if that changes how you're lighting, again, the person, so that, again, the lights aren't being everything isn't being washed out by the lighting behind them.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to keep all, and a lot of it just takes time to tune them, and that's the advantage of having some of these lights that are controllable by the phone. Means you're sitting there looking through your camera and just moving things around. Like here's what I was talking about there. This is a little earlier. I was still evolving in this process because you can see that I was using, I now have that little stand, but I was using the little ice chest to put that comes with the hotel room to put my laptop on. You can see the Pavo tubes here. Those are just set at a standard 56, I believe, maybe 32. These are these stands, these kind of all-purpose stands that I use everywhere, for that. But this is where I replaced the lamps. so that's what we can see. And then you can see I'm adding a little bit more with another Pavo tube and another Pavo tube. So there's some lighting coming up from the Pavo tubes here. These are my two keys. And then you have, then I replaced the lights there. And it produced, I think that was on on one of our shows here, and it seemed to produce a pretty good look. I like cool lights behind me. You'll find that generally I use cool lighting as well as neutral or cool colors that I wear, and that's because it makes skin tones look better. So that's the reason I go down that path. Go ahead, Bill.
What's the model number on that laptop stand, Alex?
Ice thing.
Ice one.
Yeah, like ice thing. Like it comes with the room. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to mention for Jeff, since you're in a voice booth kind of space, I had to light me here on office hours my first couple of months in that. So what worked for me was a large ring light that I put up in the corner, kind of pointed down at me. The camera was in the center of it. So I got 360-degree facial lighting out of that. But even dimmed as much as possible, it was too bright, and it was shutting the iris of the camera down so that the rest of the booth around me, even with the lights that I ended up using, ended up being too dark. So I actually had to cut a piece of two-stop ND from a 22 by 28 inch seat in a circle and put that inside and put another diffusion thing on top of it to get that light down enough so that I could balance it with the colored lights in the thing, and that worked. So my face got a lot of neutral colored lights, and it kept all the spill off of me. But it was that combination of having to work the light.
And I think that it's one of the big arguments for being on the panel often. For me, is that I don't need any arguments. I really just enjoy being on the panel with everybody every morning. But one of the big arguments to be on the panel is that you get to practice this all the time. So you're practicing, and what you're seeing is us constantly evolving. And you get a playground where you're playing, where you're working out with a lot of people that are pretty good at it. And so you get to see yourself in comparison, not with the utter horror that is almost everybody else's Zoom connections. It's hard for you to get better when everyone around you, isn't putting any effort into it. And so it's easier to get, for me, because of the panel, I'm constantly looking at things that I like about what other people are doing and going, oh, I really like that, or I really like this. And I keep on moving those things around because other people are outdoing me somewhere. And, I put it in there, and I don't necessarily need to fix it at that moment. But, like I had mics that are good, but I needed them for other things, and I need to do other and I saw that, Courtney, had a really good mic, and I moved to, and we tested it against a much more expensive mic, and it was great. And so I'm still using the Stellar X2. And there's so many things here that I get from the other panelists. I moved to the Sony because other people are using Greg Gibson. It's all Greg Gibson's fault. Watching Greg, and then Greg pops on, and you're like, man, does that look good? Like, it's just, you're just like, he looks so good. And I was just like, I don't know if I can keep on doing it if I can't keep up with Greg. So, a lot of these things come from us, playing a really hard game, on the panel every day, and the practice of it, of just knowing how it all works, being able to know how everything's second nature. It makes you look so much better in a meeting. Like, just, like you just play a lot harder. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I did find Alex's laptop stand. It's a Hepco Elmar R2000 Sand, and they're $57 for 36 of them.
So the funny thing is the stand it's a broken. I don't know why, but BROCOON makes the and it's less expensive than what you just showed, and it's actually built for the laptop. All right, next question.
That's an industrial motel style ice bucket. That's very impressive. Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Where can you save money in your studio by spending more time doing it yourself?
Go, Jeffrey.
That's actually getting harder and harder to do nowadays. I remember when we first put together studios and you didn't have Amazon, you didn't have these third-party companies with lights and microphones and that you could get for under $100. But there's still some things that I do. I'm going to show you a couple quick things here. This is the other side. Sorry about the lighting on this because the other light just basically washed this out. I had to turn that off. So this is my Vizio and the camera that I showed you from earlier. And instead of putting anything on tables, creating tables for that, I actually went to a garage sale and found one of these old, what are they? The old stands that you would use for your AV cart. They're AV cart stands. That's what it is. And I fashioned it to put a VESA mount right on there so that the monitor's on here. Because the one thing about my studio is everything in my studio is on wheels. And that's by design. So if I need to move the table out to move something else in, I can do that. It's something I saw when we went to the Today Show. We saw how they moved everything around in their design. That's what I wanted to do with my studio. The other thing is I love these little panels. These are actually insulation panels, and I use them. You couldn't see it behind that TV, so that's why I'm showing you this one. So this insulation panel, on one side it's blue, on the other side it's kind of reflective. And I've had these above my head at times. And if you point the light right onto those panels, it'll actually create a reflection. So you don't have to have a lot of lighting around. And then, of course, the simple things like, for instance, I think this is a 200-watt CFL. You just have to watch out what type of CFLs you get because, first of all, they take a little time to warm up. And then second of all, they could cause a flicker. So you put them behind a softbox so you can get some good lighting. So, and then of course you go down to the hardware store, you can get the clamp lights to put on overhead. I used to have those in my studio all over. And then I switched to panels when they became less expensive.
Yeah, and I've used some really big CFLs. I've mostly moved to LEDs just because the CFLs have a big green spike in them that, from a color perspective, that was always problematic for what we were doing. The big thing for me is the infrastructure that sits around it. So most of the electronics themselves is not something that I'll necessarily update. But if you go back to this, what I had here, this maker pipe is been incredible. This is just EMT rail. I have as much as you should safely put on EMT rail. So I until I go up to a higher, like I'm going to probably rebuild the grid that I have up above with 1-inch EMT because right now I'm using 3/4 and it bows a little bit because I have so much stuff that's going across it. So I'm going to probably update that. But being able to build these big soft boxes and being able to rig all of this stuff up has been super useful. I'm going to end up building a new table. I'm just trying to figure out what I want. So the nice thing is I kind of cobble things together iteratively. I figure out kind of where I like things. And then I'm going to try to build something that represents that, kind of as I move forward. So, but I think that it's the infrastructure around the electronics that really you can save a lot of money on by doing yourself. And it's fun. My son and I put most of the stuff up, so he's now taller than me. So I've decided he's useful. So I hire him to work with me. I do hire him and pay him a solid wage to help me figure this stuff out. And all you need is one of these. This is what you cut the EMT with. You think that you need a more motorized version of it, but this makes a lot less mess and it's easier to listen to radio. Next question.
Bart Gaffney and Economowak, how often in your broadcasts are you B-rolling footage and what are you using in your 10K studio?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing a live stream, that's why I have the multicam setup, so I can switch between between this camera and then this camera and then back to my main camera. But for doing any type of B-roll, I'll definitely get out something like I have a couple Pivos, which if you don't know what those are little devices you can actually put a camera on, and with an app you can do AI ability. But they also have a turntable mode. So if you set them and you create a little platform for them so they're really not seen, then you can start using them to spin around products, and then put them in white boxes or anything like that to really get a good shot of the device. For doing anything like when I go to CES and things like that, doing B-roll is just basically pulling out. It used to be using my camera, but now it's taking my phone and pulling it out and just running it across an item and then bringing it in. And then, of course, they're recorded in the studio. Now I'm working on ISO. If I'm not doing it live, I'm working on recording ISOs so I can bring in that as B-roll if I need to.
Go, Bill.
I read this as generating essentially play out. That what he was looking for was, in the case of a live show, rolling in footage from something. And there's a lot of ways to do it. We talk about the play out be a lot. Anything that connects something. I tend to use Keynote on an iPad Pro sitting next to me, embed the video in that as an H.264, and then just connect that into my ATEM switcher via an HDMI port. And that's all I need to run the video on my iPad and have it go out over the broadcast.
Go, Cordy.
Yeah, I'm always throwing in graphics here, which is just off a secondary screen off of the Dell. But I also have one of these Melees plugged into the video switcher into the ATEM, so I can cut to that. And I have my own video player here that I can make full screen and control it off camera from a separate keyboard. So I can roll video in that way as well.
I do it similar to Courtney. I have another Mac Mini that is dedicated just to video playback, and so I'm typically I use a couple different things, whether it's QLab or Keynote. Usually Keynote if I'm showing keynotes. I don't play a lot of video in Keynote because I think that it drops frames, and I find that the play system is really inside a Keynote. If I just want to play a video, it's fine, but if I want to scrub back and forth or do anything that's complicated inside of Keynote, it's just truly painful, and so I don't use it that way very often. Go ahead, Jeff.
It's a question really for Bill, and maybe Alex, what you're talking about also, but if you're playing a video, why do you need to have it in Keynote versus just play the video natively on the iPad?
Well, there has to be something feeding my ATEM switcher, or I can't switch to it when I need it. I want to be in regular camera, and then I want to go to the video. So the question is, without doing a screen share, how am I going to instantly cue the video playback device, whatever it is, to get it into the stream?
And the problem is that, like, for instance, QuickTime, if you want to go full screen with QuickTime, as soon as you say full screen, it turns off all your other screens. So unless you have a dedicated computer, which I do, like, it is super annoying. Like, the full screen should be one screen, not all of the screens. It is like, I don't understand that. I love Apple, but there's sometimes when you're just like, what were you thinking? Like, like, why would I ever want that? Anyway, so anyway, quick with Keynote, very quickly inside of, they made a present to window, which you can then do full screen. You can tag it and it'll go full screen without taking over everything else. And that makes it a lot easier to do those things. But so does like something like a QLab, where it just says go out to this output, which is nice as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What piece of gear would have the greatest impact if it were to fail, and how would you work around or fix the issue?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would say the audio chain as a whole is probably the most important, because if your video goes out, I mean, you're dark, that's not great, but at least you can say, oh my gosh, something happened with my camera. The cat kicked over the camera, whatever. Vice versa. If your camera, if they see you, don't hear you, you're just waving and doing sign language. So I would say this audio chain. And then, I would almost say it's better to maybe identify the few things that aren't critical, because everything else, as the saying goes, your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. If you can have the best stuff, and if one cable fails, everything that's running through it fails. So redundancy is the key. Either having just a cheap camera or a cheap mic that you can quickly switch to. Cables, of course, you should always have any important cable on hand, a duplicate of it, because cables just go bad. So that's the key, I think.
Yeah, Jeffrey, real quick.
duplicates of power cables that aren't normal. I'm going to add to that. But for me, it's internet, because a lot of the stuff I'm running is NDI. And of course, I do a lot of live streams. That's why I have two internets coming into the house. So if one fails, then I can move over. So I'm really desperately waiting for that fiber connection to get turned on.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, the Dell will occasionally crash. That's why I have the Melee, which is running into to the switcher as well. I can flip over to it if I need to. And also I have a UPS on all of my, not only the Dell, but the cable modem and the router and the switch are all on UPS. So if there's a power failure or a power glitch, it doesn't take everything down.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would the Blue Sona be a solid mic in the same class as the Heil PR40? And he's got a link to it.
Haven't used it yet. I don't think any of us have it. It's a pretty pricey for the type of microphone that it is. I think that it would probably, I probably wouldn't replace the PR40 with that one specifically. At that price point, I'd start looking really closely at the SMB7. Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, what are some additional hidden costs you can incur after you've budgeted for the $10,000 studio?
Go ahead, John.
Sorry about that. Somebody's texting me. So this is a great question. And when I built my Studio C over here, at least 50% of this cost, I've got all the same gear that's been enumerated multiple times, but all of the stands and all of the clamps, super clamps, all that stuff added up way more than I ever thought. And the desk, my desk is expensive as well. So the furniture and all the mounting and all the cables is way more than you think it's going to be.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, if you're mix and matching, then all of a sudden you might find a situation where one camera is not working as well as the other camera, or not working at all with the other camera or the other microphone or whatnot, and then you have to go in. So do a little bit of research as to what you're putting together and make sure that it's all going to work in harmony.
Good. Next question.
John Snyder's up next, Reno, Nevada. If you were building toward the $10,000 studio and had to make a budgetary choice, would you start with a lesser audio interface or camera?
Good, Chris.
I think I'd start with the lesser audio interface, just because I think with the audio you can build pieces, whereas video camera, you buy the video camera and that's the video chain, and where the audio chain, there can be more pieces in that. So you could buy the video camera big up front and then piece the audio together.
Yeah, I'd probably get an MV7 if that's what we send out, and it sounds relatively good for most of what we do. I think the big problem for me is that if I don't have the noise assist on a mix pre, I just don't care anymore. Like I will admit it makes such a big difference in my space and in my mobile spaces that without the noise assist, I just it can just be a USB mic. I mean, so that's from my perspective. Next question.
John Foltz back from Salins Grove. For Chris Sabato, what computer specs do you use for your Vmix app?
Go ahead, Chris.
This computer is an i7 with 32 gigs of RAM and a Quadro P2200. I'm also speccing out a new broadcast Vmix PC, and I asked a question about it in Discord. So if you're interested, hop into the Discord Vmix, and we're talking about it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wonders if you could fit basic audio networking into a $10,000 budget.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, absolutely. Dante, I mean, you get two nodes of Dante, that's about $200 right there. But if you want to really kind of push that envelope, try using NDI for your audio, and that's absolutely free if you're running it off of different machines from one direction to the other. So, and that's what I've been playing with.
Next question.
Jeff Cohen, Miami Beach, thoughts on deciding between doing a good virtual background in a fixed location studio versus dealing with the visual design and acoustics of a real background?
Go, Jeff.
It was, again, watching the Zoom AI Summit that made me think of this. They, like many, obviously asked every guest to use the same virtual background for consistency. And it was clear that probably all the guests and and some of the Zoom staff, and it was great. But what I did notice is that they very obviously were not green screening. They were, doing the virtual background, in front of a barn or something, because you saw the telltale and what I consider distracting, flares around the ears and all the stuff that comes with it. So it makes me wonder, if you do it right, as good as it could be with a green screen, can you get a pretty good effect now doing whatever you're doing, going through Zoom? Or should people really focus on, if they're building a studio from scratch, really try and focus on building out a real background?
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, if you go back and look at the episode on wood turning with Cindy Dresner, it was an amazing how she's done a green screen background with a wood lathe in the foreground, and she's put a still of the rest of her shop behind her, and it looks perfectly real. And her key, although it's being done, I think, in Vmix, looks perfectly good and believable, because she took the background photo from the same position as her webcam camera and inserts it in there behind her. And it gives her the flexibility of putting herself cut out in the corner when she's demonstrating her wood turning. So take a look at that, and you'll see a great representation of how to do a virtual studio that looks perfectly real and within the context of where she is.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Cindy Drozda, I think it was on Monday, wasn't it? And it was just a fabulous use of chroma keying perfectly. So it's possible. Took a lot of doing for her to get it there, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, there's also a level of good enough. As the hard part that I have is that I was a compositor for film, and so I see a lot. And so I find it harder to do green screen. One thing that I'm experimenting with right now that I may try on the road actually is there's a company called Sub2R. So it's sub2r.com. And they have a self-lit green screen that can go behind you. And so I'm going to take a look at that. I may appear that way next week at some point to see how it works. But it has lighting interior to it, so you don't have to light it from the outside. It gives you a nice pure green screen. So we're going to kind of take a look at that. And they saw the show. I think we were talking about green screen at some point and sent me one to test. So we're going to take a look at it and see how well it works. And I've done green screen in the past for this show, and I got it going pretty well. The main thing that was there was that I shot it with the background with, like Cindy, same camera, same position. Now I shot my living room instead of here because there was nothing to shoot here. And what I did then is I keyed it, but I took the camera that was here, I picked it up literally on the tripod, set it down where I wanted, framed it, but by only moving the tripod. So my camera was exactly in the same angle and position that it was in here. And then when I turned it on, it looks natural. So one thing people forget about virtual backgrounds is that you have to match the focal length. You have to match the vanishing points. You have to match the height and everything else. That really sells that background and has it not feel weird. So if you're going to do it, you got to do that. And then you want to have a really good green screen. And then you want to try to get almost every hair. As soon as it's a little off, people just start looking at it. They can't stop. It's actually worse than having something there. And so I'm not I will say that I did that for a while, and I just found that doing the green screen, if it went wrong or if anything went sideways, it really took the viewer out of it. And I decided to go to a gray screen that I could just pop up behind me rather than worrying about what that was. So I kind of moved away from it because of that. Because I'm driving down to LA next week, I'm going to take both the green screen and a gray screen with me. So we'll play with both of them in the show while I'm on the road. But I think that you have to watch it. I will never use a green screen, or I use the auto removal inside of a video application. So like Zoom or Teams or whatever, because I have some dignity. So my self-worth is high enough that I won't degrade myself by putting a virtual background inside of a video system. Maybe someday it'll get good enough that I would be willing to slosh through the mud, but I haven't seen mud that I'm willing to stick my foot into yet. And that's what it is. It's just mud. And it is an embarrassment that Zoom does that. Like it is like they should be embarrassed that they do it. I'm a big fan of Zoom. It It is damaging. The reason it makes me frustrated is it damages our entire industry and what Zoom's trying to do by doing that, because it looks horrible. And people say, well, I don't want to do a virtual event. I want to go to a physical event. Why do they want to do that? Because everyone looks so bad. Like everybody looks so bad and they sound so bad. And when Zoom propagates that, they are destroying their own market. Like what? Whoever thinks that that's a good idea is crazy. Like, I'm sure they're really smart in some places, but nuts. It is the nuttiest thing that I've ever seen, is that they force people to do something that actually degrades the value of their own platform. That's all I got to say. Like it's so frustrating when I watch these conferences and it looks horrible. And I'm like, you are damaging my business. My business is getting damaged by what Zoom is doing, and I'm doing it on top of Zoom's platform, and you're hurting me. Personally, you're costing me money by making it look so bad, and it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating to watch them just burn up their own market for no reason. Anyway, it's just, I get that there's a thought process that we should make it available to everyone and everything else, but let's bring up the level, the level of the conversation so that online events are actually competitive, and they're actually worth watching. And if you are putting a virtual background behind your speakers, I can't even say it. I can't say, it starts with a P, but you're doing that on them. I guess there it is. I said it on them, and on your show, and you're ruining it. I'm just letting you know. And if you do a really good green screen and you have a really great setup and you do all the things I talked about, you can get away with it. But if you're using the built-in tools for any of these things, you are ruining your event and you're damaging our entire market, and you should stop. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I think, if I just could, I think there's a time and place for that feature. And the feature, by the way, is amazing. What it is able to do without a green screen is amazing. So for a personal call, if I'm, who knows where, and I just want to answer, real quick, get on, it's great for that. But yes, the fact that for an event, and what's worse is, that some of those folks may have had good sets, but they clearly must have insisted for consistency.
I won't do it.
Want everyone to use this virtual background.
People hand me those backgrounds, and what I do is I extract the logos out of the backgrounds because that's what they really want, and I key them over top of my thing. I put like a little thing down the side, and they're like, "Oh, that looks a lot better. That actually looks really nice," And I'm like, I won't use it. Like I won't do it. If I thought that I would need a virtual background, I just don't turn my camera on. Like if I'm going to stoop down that low, I'm just going to go audio, and I do that a lot. But you can always tell when I'm not in this studio is that I'm on audio. Like I will almost never turn my camera on if I'm not set up. Next, Courtney, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say I was watching Twit the other day, and somebody was coming on with a virtual background using this Reflect Media retroreflective screen with this green light that goes around the lens. And the problem with that is, it does a pretty good green screen, but you're throwing green light onto your face unless you have a lot of white light to wash it out. It's a problem. And the other problem is they had a high LPR 40 in the foreground, which has that sandblasted aluminum finish, and it turned green, but it wouldn't key out. So it just looked really strange.
I used to own one of those, and I just found that there was all occlusion problems are another thing. If you get too close, you get the penumbra starts to cut through, and so I don't approve. We stopped using it. We tried it for like 2 or 3 projects and moved back to regular green. We're gonna go just a little bit over to finish this. I know I went off a little bit. I apologize for that, but we'll just try to cut through these real quick. Next question.
Joe Floyd, Gainesville. Alex, have you considered buying a Klein reamer bit for the EMT? It saves a lot of time and finger cuts from freshly cut EMT.
So on this guy here, this is what that does. And so it's built into this. So I cut it. It's smooth on the outside, by the way, the nature of the blade. And then you take this little guy and you turn it over and you spin it, and it gets rid of, it deburrs that area really effectively. And I haven't had a problem with it. As soon as I realized what this was, I didn't know what it was for a long time. And then when I knew, then I did better. Next question.
Ronnie Hausoy, Tromsø, Norway. Most office hours use physical backgrounds, calming down the image by depth of field and not using a screen. Would using a big screen TV with resolume and nice images or graphics destroy the calmness and take away focus from the speaker?
Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
I don't think so. But I think if you have to really pick and choose what you do. I know a few YouTubers that have monitors that they're using in their productions behind them, not only for showing different scenes, but also I've been doing some research on how people are turning monitors into windows, so they can have a really nice studio with a window that they can control.
Yep. Go ahead, Courtney.
You can do it. Just crank the brightness down so it's not brighter than a normal down background, and use static images only on it that don't change.
And it works great. I mean, we almost every insert studio that we work in has it. Just like bad virtual backgrounds. If they use bad ones, like this weekend, with George Stephanopoulos, really bad backgrounds. If you use bad backgrounds, it's not great. But if you use good ones, it's great. Next question.
Peter Bourne, Auckland, New Zealand says, from a DR, and I think this is digital recorder and or backup perspective, what would you spend your money on?
You're looking for something that's going to be able to record your video. I still really like HyperDecks because they're just small, and I push a button and then they record it. But I also have because I've been around for a while, I have these little Pixas that I have a couple of these laying around. So I still use these a lot for 1080p work because I have them, but you can't buy them anymore. So they're still great. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the great questions from our producers that kept this conversation going. There's no show without you. If you stop asking questions or you don't ask enough questions, it's so great when we come in and there's a bunch of questions at the top of the hour, and those questions keep rolling in so that we don't have to worry about it. If you ever see us kind of going off the rails talking, most of the time it's because there's not a lot of questions. And so we're just kind of like filling time. So it's really great when the producers are asking lots of questions, especially before the show, so we have time to look at them, and makes us sound smarter because we had a little time to think about it. So go ahead, keep throwing those in. Thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. Of course, great second hour here. A lot of people had great input, and also a great first hour. We can't, again, we've done it with less people, and it's harder. It's not as good a show. So we really appreciate your contribution. And of course, we appreciate the incredible team, the management team, the development team, and the folks that are building code, and the live team that is, of course, making this all happen every single day, 7 days a week. We really appreciate your contribution. We traveled 83,000 miles, 133,000 kilometers, and that is 658 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was a merry message. I hate virtual background.
We were left unsure of your opinion of that.
Did you wonder how I felt? I wanted to make sure because I know that you guys think that I'm like kind of on the fence.
Yeah. I've been wondering.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a little more clarity now.
I literally open up Zoom events and I go, oh, that'd be a great subject. And I open it and I'm like, I'm not watching this. I'm not watching. It really was distracting. It's so horrible. It's so horrible.
Actually turned off.
I just could listen, just close my eyes and try to not remember what I saw. All right, here we go.
I think we also probably have some